All right, so if you can see on the screen there, we're going to look at Era 1 of the review here. Again, as we looked at last class, there will be 3 options on LEQ, and you only have to write on one of the options of the LEQ. But each of the LEQs will be on a theme. So, for example, if the theme is politics, that's probably pretty easy, right? And it's just choosing the era that's easiest for you. They will not do a writing on Era 1 or a writing on Era 9, but it could be anything from Era 2 to Era 8 for LEQ writing. For DBQ, they never do Era 1 or 2 or Era 9. So when it comes to like what's the era that you need to study the least, it's Era 9 and Era 1. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And I think that in our other review packet, you can see exactly what we need to study. But we have the different things of America, national identity. You need to know, like, what does it mean to be an American, right? The whole idea of freedom, entrepreneurship, freedom in the economy, freedom in politics, that's always kind of a big thing. Work exchange technology, that entrepreneurship, the different technology and work and labor unions that we've done. Also with culture, so whether it's with males or females or people of color, things like that, you need to distinguish that. Also with religion, right? Different Great Awakenings that we had. Also with migration and settlement, whether it's people immigrating to America or whether it's people migrating inside of America from place to place, or whether it's settlements, that's important to know, and also geography and environment. So anything that's environmental, anything that like is geographically different than other regions is good to know. Always be thinking in contrast. If you're thinking about this, how does that contrast to that? If we're looking at the south, how does that contrast to the north? If we're looking at the east, how does that contrast to the west? Because just as north versus south is important, east versus west is important. Because is west more modern than the east in American history? Typically not, right? It's more rugged. It's more the frontier, if you will. And we're talking about, the Midwest. We're talking about Texas area. We're talking about Kansas area, Colorado, right? Even into California early on. That's a lot less progressed in a lot less cities than on the east. The east is kind of the snubbery and kind of we know how things go. And the west is kind of this unsettled area, the taming of the west. And then America and the world. How do we interact with the world? So, as you can see right here. And so the question is, how's America's identity? Well, there's no real cohesion for Native American groups. Okay? So you do have the Aztec nation, you have the Inca nation, you have the Maya nation, so those big nations, but there's really no cohesiveness. Yes, in Mississippi, you have Cahokia with the mound villages that they have. So you do have some metropolises with, even a couple 100,000 people living. But most Native American groups are in smaller tribal regions. The Europeans, early on, the Europeans did... why can't I spell Europeans? There we go. Did not intend to stay in this new land, right? Because we have 1492, Columbus. He comes to America, and he's still looking for that passage to the east. He thinks he found it. When he starts interacting with the natives, he tells his men, hey, don't cheat them. Make sure that you're treating them, kindly, because he thinks that this is a separate nation, that he's reached Japan or something of that, the East Indies, right? That's why he calls them Indians. But then the second time that he visits in 1493, that's when Columbus turns into the bad guy that we know. that's where he starts to change and he starts to enslave these natives, right? So you kind of almost have two Columbuses, in my opinion. Well, with the Spanish, politically, the Spanish are really dominating. So Spanish domination. And unlike the English, who are coming over here with joint stock companies, with business adventures, a lot of self-made men, the Spanish are under the crown, right? For the French and the Dutch, what is similar about them in the New World? How are they interacting with the natives? Do we remember? They traded with them, right? Traded with Native Americans, right? That was kind of their commerce, right? There were treaties and conflicts that existed. Remember that each Native American group would side with a European power because they were hoping to use the Europeans against the different Native conflicts and such. So there were Native groups that even were trying to use the Europeans as Europeans were trying to use them. In the New World, with work exchange technology, we have new crops that emerge with new goods. What's that exchange called? The Columbian Exchange, right? There's mostly slave labor. Now you might be wondering, what about the indentured servitude? Well, this is era one, right? Indentured servants aren't coming over until 1607. So the early slave labor is of the natives, right? You have the Spanish and the Portuguese mainly that are enslaving, but also the Portuguese bring black slaves over to Brazil too. But mainly you have that slave labor, especially in the sugar plantations and the gold mines in Central and South America. When it comes to culture, there's this blending of marriages and cultures. And so you really have kind of the mestizos, which is the native and Spaniard mix. You have the encomienda system, where the Spaniards are basically enslaving the natives, and the natives live on the farm that they're working on and go to the church and everything. And then the Pueblo Revolt will take place, where natives start revolting against the Spanish. So with culture, you have the blending of those cultures. Religion mainly drives exploration. Religion drives exploration. Okay, whether it's the Spanish that have the Franciscan padres that are Christianizing under the Roman Catholic Church the natives, or whether it's the French Jesuits that are converting the natives as well, kind of mixing the religion. Again, remember, when it comes to culture, the Spanish are enslaving and mixing with the natives. The French and the Dutch, they are mixing with the natives, but also mixing religion. They're not subjugating them like the Spanish are. And the English, they're kind of having this frontier of exclusion, where it's like, hey, you're over there, we're over here. We're not going to so much mix with you, except for the isolated examples of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. But there's not as much mixing and intermarrying happening with the English. There's more of a separation there. When it comes to migration, the first natives were not coming over on a boat from Israel in 500 BC like the Book of Mormon chronicles. There's absolutely no archaeology or genealogy that supports that. But there is support that the Bering Land Bridge, known as the Bering Strait, was bringing the natives over, because natives, are closer to Asian than they are to Jerusalem, right? Jewish, as the Book of Mormon says. The Europeans are coming to extract goods. So Europeans coming to extract goods. Because they're not intending to stay, they're more trying to extract these goods. When it comes to geography, we have this gold in Latin America that we find. And sadly, 95% of natives die from diseases. Okay, so that's why we'll have the disappearance of the Maya and such, because these diseases wipe out huge villages. When it comes to America and the world, of course, there's this competition of Europeans. Okay, and also you have these Native American alliances. So there's this European competition, and because of that competition, there's these alliances with the natives that happen. So that's era 1 review. Do you need to go back and reread the chapter? Definitely not. Do you need to go back to the note cards or anything like that? That could be helpful. But definitely use this as a guide of, okay, do I understand what it means to be an American in era 1? Well, this idea of America really didn't exist yet. You had Native Americans and then you had European. By era 2, you have still this like, hey, I'm English, or I'm from my colony, not I'm from America just yet. That's more of era 3. So kind of understanding that is helpful.